Her daughter-in-law yanked the oxygen cord, mid-argument, mid-breath. Janet Hollis, 76, widowed and wheelchair-bound, didn't scream. Mara, married to her only son, smirked and walked off like nothing happened. By midnight, Janet had updated the will, called the attorney, and signed twice. The lake house, the annuities, the storage vault, gone from Mara's future. And when the family gathered for Sunday brunch, only one woman knew why the keys were missing. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The refrigerator hummed with a quiet insistence, the only sound cutting through the strained silence that had settled over the Eastston home like an unwelcome fog. It was late afternoon, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and a chill wind rattled the windows of the modest Fort Collins house. Gloria sat in her recliner near the sliding glass door, a flannel blanket draped neatly over her legs, a half-finished crossword puzzle resting on the small table beside her. Her oxygen tank hissed gently, a sound so constant it had become background music to her days. She heard the footsteps before she saw the shadow, hard heels, fast and clipped. Lena entered the living room with a half-empty container of sour cream clenched in her hand, her expression sharp enough to cut glass. "Did you use this in the mashed potatoes?" she asked, voice tight and thin with forced restraint. Gloria didn't look up right away. She marked one more letter on her crossword with a mechanical pencil before lifting her eyes. "I did." "Why?" Lena held up the container like it was evidence in a courtroom. "Eric told you he's off dairy. Has been for 6 months. It upsets his stomach. I told you twice." "Last year he went back for thirds," Gloria said softly. "Didn't look too upset to me." The younger woman's jaw twitched. She set the container down harder than necessary on the coffee table. "You do this every time. Pretend you didn't hear, play innocent. It's exhausting." Gloria reached for her mug of tea, though her hand was steadier than it felt. She sipped once before replying. "I'm 76. I forget things sometimes. It's not personal." "But it is personal, Gloria. Everything is, with you." There was a pause, dense, suffocating. The furnace kicked on with a low rumble. Lena took 2 steps closer, hovering over the chair like a shadow stretching long. "You make every little thing harder than it needs to be," she continued, her voice dropping into something sharper. "And then you act like we owe you for tolerating it." Gloria didn't respond. Her breathing, already shallow from the morning's chill, became more noticeable. The oxygen line trailed neatly over her shoulder, tucked beneath her sweater collar like a lifeline that dared anyone to touch it. And then Lena did. With a sudden movement, quick, vicious, and horribly deliberate, she reached down and unclipped the oxygen cord from the machine. The hiss stopped. Gloria gasped, her body convulsing forward slightly as her lungs reached for air that no longer flowed. One hand gripped the arm of the recliner, while the other scrabbled toward the dangling cord, her eyes wide and watering. The seconds stretched, cruel and quiet, except for the ragged wheeze of her breath, fighting through the vacuum. "Lena," she croaked, barely audible. Down the hallway, Eric's voice rang out. "What's going on now?" Lena didn't answer. She stood frozen, eyes wide, the gravity of what she'd done sinking in. Then, in a blur of motion, she turned away. Gloria's fingers found the connector and jammed it back into place. Air rushed into her chest like forgiveness. She coughed violently, head bowed, hands trembling. From the hallway again. "Hello? Lena? What the hell was that?" Still, Eric didn't come into the room. The sound of the living room television rising a few notches filled the absence instead, sitcom laughter echoing inappropriately across the walls. Lena hovered near the hallway door for a moment longer, expression unreadable, then muttered just loud enough to be heard, "You're just draining us." She turned and disappeared down the hall. A door slammed shut seconds later. The room settled back into stillness, broken only by the gentle hiss of reconnected oxygen. Gloria sat in silence, breathing in and out, feeling the weight of something shift inside her. Not just anger, not even fear, something older, quieter, something final. After a few minutes, she reached over and opened the drawer beside her chair. Inside was a small leather-bound notebook, green with gold-foiled edges. She opened it to a blank page and wrote, slowly and deliberately, each letter etched with purpose, "No one who yanks life gets legacy." She closed the notebook, returned it to its place, and folded her hands in her lap. Outside, dusk was falling fast, dragging the cold in behind it. The windows rattled once more. She didn't look toward the hallway. She didn't need to. The following morning brought with it a dull, pewter light that clung to the walls like wet fog. A brittle quiet hovered in the house, broken only by the soft beeping of Gloria's oxygen monitor and the occasional creak of wood settling under cold. At precisely 8:05 a.m., the front door opened with the gentle click of a key, Hannah's key. She stepped inside wearing navy scrubs, her dark brown curls tied back, a thermos in one hand, and her clipboard tucked under her arm. "Morning, Miss Eastston," she called softly as she closed the door behind her. "Bit of a chill out there today?" Gloria was seated in her recliner, the same spot as the day before. The crossword was untouched this time. A shawl covered her shoulders, and her hands lay still in her lap. She nodded once, not lifting her eyes. Hannah paused. Normally, Gloria would already be pointing out the weather forecast or asking about her dog, but not today. "Did you sleep okay?" Hannah asked, walking slowly toward the back of the room, setting her things on the sideboard. She kept her voice light, but her eyes scanned carefully. Still, no reply. It wasn't silence that alarmed Hannah. It was the stiffness, the tension in Gloria's body that hadn't been there during her last shift 2 days ago. She pulled on a pair of latex gloves and knelt beside the oxygen unit to inspect the flow rate. It was correct, steady, but when she glanced up to check the cannula fit behind Gloria's ears, she noticed it, an odd patch of red and faint purple shadowing just above the collarbone, partially hidden by the sweater. "Did you bump yourself?" Hannah asked gently, careful not to let concern tighten her voice. Gloria's head turned slightly, her eyes now focused and sharp despite the morning haze. "Not exactly." Hannah waited. Silence again. "All right," she said finally. "I'll make note of it anyway. Part of the usual log." She stood and scribbled discreetly on the clipboard, but her eyes didn't leave Gloria's face. "You know if anything feels off? I'm here." There was a pause. Then, in a voice barely more than a breath, Gloria said, "She unplugged me." Hannah blinked. "Who?" "Lena," Gloria said. Her eyes didn't waver. She was angry. It wasn't an accident. For a moment, the words seemed to hang in the air like a wire pulled taut. Hannah didn't flinch. She lowered the clipboard. "Last night?" she asked. Gloria nodded once. "I see," Hannah said quietly. She didn't rush, didn't ask follow-ups. Instead, she walked to her bag and retrieved a small tablet. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. Then she looked up and said, "I just submitted an incident report to my agency. It's time-stamped, attached to your patient log, and forwarded to the senior nurse on call." Gloria exhaled, a soft, almost imperceptible tremor riding beneath the breath. "Would you write a statement if it came to that?" "I already did," Hannah said. They didn't speak for a long moment. Outside, a few dry leaves scratched along the window glass. Hannah returned to the sideboard and began preparing the morning medications. Measured, labeled, lined up in order. From her seat, Gloria reached for the notepad she'd used the night before but didn't open it. Instead, she reached for her cell phone. It took her a few tries, her fingers slow with age and the weight of what she was about to do. She pulled up the medical proxy list stored in her files, the one Terrence had set up years ago when she first started having lung issues. She stared at the screen for a moment, at Lena's name just beneath Eric's, her emergency contact designation staring back like a mistake she hadn't known she was making until now. Gloria pressed edit, then delete. She confirmed it. Twice. Hannah, quietly observant as always, said nothing, but she didn't need to. The soft click of the medication bottles was the only sound in the room until Gloria finally spoke. "She thought I'd be too afraid to tell anyone." Hannah looked up. She thought wrong. The office smelled of cedar and old books. Terrence Blake's law firm, tucked into a converted craftsman house on Mulberry Street, didn't believe in sterile decor or digital coffee bars. It was a place for permanence: oak desks, oil paintings, thick carpets, and conversations that decided futures. Gloria sat across from him at the wide, leather-topped desk, her handbag resting neatly beside her chair, oxygen hissing softly at her side. She had dressed with quiet intent, a slate-gray wool coat buttoned to the neck, soft gloves tucked into one pocket, and her silver hair combed into its usual gentle wave. But her eyes, sharpened by 76 years of knowing when someone had gone too far, held none of their usual reserve. Terrence adjusted his reading glasses and looked down at the living trust documents on the desk between them. "It's all ready," he said. "Just as we discussed on the phone, Lena is fully removed as a beneficiary. Eric remains in the document, though in name only. He receives nothing unless you reinstate him, which, based on our last conversation, seems unlikely." He waited for her to speak, but Gloria simply nodded, then reached into her purse and retrieved a fine-point red pen. She flipped open the draft copy of her old estate plan, turned to the page where Lena Easton's name had once been typed with the elegance of legal finality, and, without hesitation, drew a thick red line through it. Then, with steady fingers, she initialed in the margin. It was not a flourish. It was not symbolic. It was binding. Durable power of attorney, medical directives, successor trustee assignments, all updated? She asked, her voice even. "Yes," Terrence said. "Your new healthcare proxy will be the advocate from the Colorado End-of-Life Legal Foundation. She's vetted, neutral, and frankly bulletproof when it comes to court challenges." "Good." Gloria closed the draft folder with a soft but decisive click. Terrence studied her for a long moment. "You've always been precise, Gloria. Never reactionary. I assume this isn't the first incident." "It's the last one," she replied, her gaze not leaving the document. "It just took me too long to decide how loud I wanted to be about it." There was a pause, and then he asked gently, "Would you like me to notify them? Or send a formal letter on your behalf?" She shook her head. Let them discover it when it matters most. Let the silence do what shouting never could." Terrence nodded slowly, then slid the notarization forms across the desk. "Then let's make it real." The ride home was quiet. The sky had cleared into a pale, cloudless blue, and the streets were lined with leafless trees, their bare limbs arching like ribs over the road. Hannah drove, as she often did now. Gloria sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded over her bag. The folder of freshly signed documents nestled beside her like a passenger of its own. When they pulled into the driveway, Dolores was standing on her porch across the street, watering the frozen roots of what used to be her summer hydrangeas. She looked up as the car came to a stop, one hand shielding her eyes against the weak sun. "Someone's been out and about," she called as Gloria stepped carefully onto the front walk. Gloria paused at the base of the steps and looked across at her neighbor, the kind of friend who never asked outright but always noticed too much. "Just tying up loose ends," Gloria said. She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Dolores tilted her head, watching her closely. "You look lighter." "Do I?" Gloria adjusted the oxygen tubing behind one ear. "Maybe that's because I finally remembered what control feels like." Dolores didn't press further. She didn't have to. She simply gave a small nod, then turned back to her frozen garden, though her gaze lingered longer than usual. Inside, Gloria placed the folder on the mantel above the fireplace, beneath the framed photo of her wedding day. The contrast wasn't lost on her. What began in promise, now corrected by precision. She stared at it for a moment, then walked into the kitchen, where Hannah was unpacking groceries. "Anything else you need?" Hannah asked, sensing the weight that still clung to the air. "Yes," Gloria said, opening the drawer beside the refrigerator. She pulled out a Sharpie, black ink, permanent. She turned to the inside of the pantry door, where an old, dusty whiteboard still listed emergency numbers. Under medical contact, she drew a line through Lena's name, once scribbled in hopeful blue marker, and rewrote the new advocate's information, slow and steady. Then she capped the pen, exhaled, and said, mostly to herself, She tried to erase me. Now let's see how she handles being the one crossed out. The confrontation came on a Thursday. The house was unusually quiet when Lena entered the living room, her voice already trembling with rehearsed vulnerability. The air had that static weight of a storm that hadn't yet arrived, thick with pressure, brittle with restraint. Gloria was seated, as always, in her recliner. The late morning light filtered through the blinds in narrow golden stripes, illuminating the edge of the rug and part of her shawl. Her oxygen tank sat steady beside her, its hissing rhythm a soft counterpoint to the tension growing by the second. Lena didn't sit. She hovered in the doorway instead, arms folded, expression carefully composed into something that looked like pain. "I need to say something," she began, eyes damp. I've been talking to Eric and we're both worried. You've been acting strangely, accusing, distant." She sniffed, just slightly. "We think something's wrong. You're seeing things that aren't happening, and honestly, it's starting to feel like emotional abuse." Gloria didn't look up. She reached for the remote beside her and pressed a single button. From behind her, the hallway speaker crackled to life. A brief hiss of ambient room tone, then Lena's voice, sharp, unfiltered, unmistakable. "Just draining us." Click. The sudden silence that followed seemed to swallow the room whole. Lena's mouth opened, but no words came. Gloria raised her eyes then, level and unreadable. "That's the last 30 seconds of the hallway recorder. There's more." Lena's breath caught audibly. From the kitchen doorway, Eric appeared, his brow furrowed, voice uncertain. "Wait, what recorder?" Lena turned sharply. "She's manipulating this whole house with paranoia and planted recordings. You can't seriously think this is—" "I think it's your voice," Gloria said, calm as still water. "And my cord being yanked." Eric stood frozen, his loyalty dragging him in two directions, neither of which he fully understood. "She's playing you," Lena hissed, stepping closer to him. "You know how she is. She's been controlling everything since we moved in. All this new paperwork and lawyers and whispering with Hannah, it's not protection. It's power." Gloria lifted her chin slightly. "That's what adults do, Eric. We use what we have. In my case, it's oxygen, memory, and a notary public." Eric's face darkened, not with clarity, but confusion. He turned toward his mother, voice rising. "This is manipulation. You're manipulating this house with paperwork." Gloria didn't flinch. "Then by all means, file something." The front door creaked open, and Hannah entered mid-sentence, slipping off her coat and pausing at the sight of 3 frozen bodies arranged like chess pieces. She took in Lena's stance, Eric's posture, and Gloria's calm. "I walked into something, didn't I?" No one answered. Hannah crossed to the kitchen counter and set her bag down. "For the record," she said, peeling off her gloves, "a safety incident was logged 2 days ago. The agency has it. So does my shift coordinator. And if needed, I'll testify." Lena turned on her heel. "You don't even live here." "No, I don't," Hannah said, her voice unshaken. "Which is probably why Gloria still breathes around me." The room rippled with silence again. Eric looked between the two women, his own wife now visibly unraveling. His mouth opened like he had something to say, but whatever it was, he buried it. Gloria slowly reached for her water glass and took a sip. She didn't look at either of them. "I think we're done here," she said, gently but without space for argument. Lena made a small, frustrated sound deep in her throat, grabbed her tote from the arm of the couch, and stormed out without another word. The sound of her boots on the hardwood echoed like a retreat. Eric stayed behind for a moment longer, jaw working as if grinding between choices. Then he followed, not looking back. Gloria remained seated. She turned the hallway recorder off with one press of her finger, then glanced toward Hannah. "You all right?" Hannah asked softly. "I've never been clearer," Gloria said, "but I will need a witness for what comes next." Terrence Blake didn't blink when Gloria handed him the affidavit. He read through the pages slowly, his brow tightening, not in surprise but in respect. Every line was deliberate, every exclusion surgically clear. Lena and Eric Eastston, by name and by relationship, were removed not only as heirs, but as beneficiaries, trustees, and legal agents. The language was ironclad, annotated, and unmistakably final. Terence looked up, glasses resting low on his nose. "This is aggressive," he said plainly. Gloria folded her hands in her lap. Her nails were filed, her blouse buttoned to the neck, and her oxygen tank hissed beside her like a sleeping animal. "So was cutting my air." He nodded once. "I've included the challenge clause as requested. Any attempt to contest the trust through litigation or probate triggers automatic exclusion from any asset, past or future." "Perfect," she replied. "If they want to fight it, they can lose what they already think they're entitled to." On the desk beside her sat a blank signature page and a silver pen. Terence handed her the packet, then reached for the phone. "And the medical POA? The foundation I recommended is still available. Schedule it." 2 days later, the living room was transformed. The coffee table had been cleared, draped with a linen runner and stacked with a legal pad, 4 manila envelopes, and a small notary seal. Hannah sat beside Gloria, hair pulled into a clean twist, scrub top replaced by a charcoal cardigan. A mug of chamomile steamed gently in her hand, untouched. Across from them sat Terence and a paralegal from his office, both prepared with clipboards and witness forms. The quiet formality of the moment was broken only by the hum of the baseboard heater and the scratch of pen on paper. "I'll need your initials here," Terence said, tapping the section titled Irrevocable Exclusion, Clause 18.7. "This confirms that any attempt to challenge your decisions voids the contesting party's legal access to the trust, the home, and all assets within it." Gloria signed. Then she reached for the second form, the one detailing her medical decision-making authority, and wrote her name slowly with full flourish. When she looked up, her eyes found Hannah's. "You still willing to witness future notarizations?" she asked. Hannah didn't hesitate. "Yes, whenever you need." Terence offered a satisfied smile, the rare kind that came from admiration more than relief. "Most people your age spend their energy trying to keep the peace," he said. "You're drafting a fortress." "I'm not after peace," Gloria said quietly. "I'm after boundaries that enforce themselves." Later that evening, Gloria stood at the back fence of her garden, the ground too cold for planting but soft enough to leave a mark. She had walked out there without her cane, moving slower than usual, but with a steadiness that felt earned. Dolores called out from her porch, bundled in 2 scarves and holding a half-finished crossword puzzle. "You digging a grave or planting garlic?" she teased. Gloria turned, brushing dirt off her gloves. "Neither. Just making sure the ground remembers where lines are drawn." Dolores crossed the street and leaned on the fence. "You've been busy," she said, narrowing her eyes at the document tube tucked under Gloria's arm. "Busy doesn't cover it," Gloria replied. "I rewrote the end of the story." Dolores raised an eyebrow. "And what kind of ending did you give them?" "Not an ending," Gloria said. "A condition." She looked at her neighbor directly. "They expect a eulogy. I'm writing consequences." Dolores let out a short, surprised laugh, but Gloria wasn't smiling. "Was it hard?" she asked after a moment. "Signing them out like that?" Gloria looked up at the brittle gray sky, then down at her hands. "It was harder letting them stay." That night, she placed the finalized trust binder beside the fireplace, no longer just draft copies, but originals, embossed and sealed. She didn't sit. She just stood and looked at it, like a portrait of something finally made real. From the hallway came the muted sound of a cabinet closing. Eric, probably, or Lena. Maybe both. She didn't care. She reached up and flipped the hallway switch that disabled the doorbell. Quiet was a privilege, and now it was hers alone. Dinner was already cold when Lena set the roast chicken on the table. The thermostat read 70, but the room felt chilled, not by temperature, but by the silence that had settled between the 4 walls like frost on window glass. Hannah sat quietly near the end, folding napkins with practiced ease. Eric poured himself a 3rd glass of Cabernet without looking at anyone. Lena, dressed in her nicest sweater and freshly applied lipstick, smiled far too much. And Gloria said nothing at all. The dining room light cast long, soft shadows across the wood-grain table, catching on the edge of the oxygen tubing that looped neatly over Gloria's shoulder. She carved a slice of chicken with delicate precision, as if the act required all her attention. The knife didn't tremble, her posture didn't falter, she just didn't speak. Lena made an effort to fill the silence. "I used rosemary this time like your mother used to," she said brightly, eyes flicking toward Gloria's plate. "Do you remember her roast dinners?" "No," Gloria said without looking up. The word landed like a glass cracking in the sink. Eric let out a short, breathy laugh, the kind meant to diffuse. "Come on, Mom, you do. Sunday lunches with Nana in the Yellow House?" "I remember people who respected kitchens," Gloria replied. "And chairs? And lungs." That ended the conversation. They chewed in awkward sequence. The clink of silverware on ceramic filled the pauses. Hannah quietly passed around the roasted vegetables. Lena reached for them, her bangles clinking against her wineglass. Her hand paused mid-air as her gaze fell again, just briefly, on Gloria's oxygen cord. Not the tank, not the machine, the cord. It was a glance that lasted less than a second, but Gloria saw it. She didn't flinch. She let it sit there like a stone between them, heavy and sharp-edged. Then, without ceremony, she reached into the side of her cardigan and unfolded a single sheet of paper. She placed it next to her plate, deliberately, where the light hit it just right. The bold letters at the top read, "DNR order, do not resuscitate." Lena blinked. Eric set his glass down too hard, sloshing wine onto the tablecloth. No one reached for a napkin. "You keep that next to your dinner plate now?" Eric asked, voice tinged with sour confusion. "I keep it where it needs to be seen," Gloria answered evenly. "Right next to the knife." Lena laughed, short, strained, incredulous. "Is this supposed to scare us?" "No," Gloria said, reaching for her water. "This is supposed to remind you that I'm the one who decides when my life stops. Not you." The words hung in the air, oddly gentle and terrifying all at once. Hannah stood and collected empty plates without asking, moving with a nurse's grace and a soldier's timing. She didn't linger on the DNR. She didn't ask permission to clear it. She simply let it remain. After dinner, Gloria moved slowly through the hallway, her cane tapping once every third step. The front room, once reserved for guests, had been rearranged with new purpose. A hospital-grade lock had been installed on the door. A slim twin bed now sat beneath the bay window, and beside it a portable oxygen unit on a wheeled stand. Her personal files, trust documents, health directives, recordings, sat in a fireproof safe under the writing desk. When she closed the door behind her, the click of the lock echoed down the hallway like a verdict. In the kitchen, Eric leaned on the counter, swirling the last of his wine. His jaw was tight, his shoulders hunched. Lena stood beside him, arms folded. "She's isolating," he muttered. "That's what this is." "She's fortifying," Lena corrected. Eric shook his head. "It's not fair." From behind them, Hannah stepped into the doorway with calm, steady hands. "Air's not fair either," she said softly. "But she gives it to you anyway." They both turned toward her. She tilted her head. "You might want to start there." That night, Gloria didn't sleep. She lay beneath the cool white sheets, eyes open, breathing slow and even. Through the glass pane, the stars above Fort Collins blinked faintly in the winter haze. Next to her bed, the trust binder sat untouched. But beside it, folded like a place card at a banquet, was the DNR form, signed, witnessed, framed in glass. The frame was old but well kept, mahogany with tiny carved flourishes along the corners. Gloria had dusted it with lemon oil that morning, polishing it until it caught light the way her husband used to catch snowflakes in his lashes. The photo inside was one she hadn't displayed in years. Her and James, young and smiling, standing in front of their first tree on their first Christmas together. Her hair had been shorter then, his tie slightly crooked. They looked like they didn't yet know that life could bruise them. She hung it in the hallway outside the study, where the light from the front window reached in around 3 o'clock each afternoon. Below it, she centered a second frame, slightly larger. The newly signed trust documents, her power of attorney, the notarized affidavit, each copy printed on heavy stock and displayed with crisp alignment, the gold notary stamp gleaming in the bottom corner like a medallion. She stepped back, cane in one hand, and studied the two frames together. Love above law. History above consequence. But both present. Both permanent. A knock at the back door broke the moment. Dolores entered carrying a warm loaf wrapped in a dish towel, her parka unzipped, breath fogging faintly in the cold. "You're not supposed to be lifting things," she said, glancing at the small step stool behind Gloria. "I didn't lift," Gloria replied. "I balanced. There's a difference." Dolores set the bread on the counter, then peered around the corner toward the hallway. "Is that—" "It is. Your Christmas photo," Dolores said, squinting. "You had that one in a drawer forever." "Mm-hmm. And what's underneath it?" She stepped closer, leaning in. "Oh." Gloria said nothing. Dolores looked back at her. "You framed your estate documents?" "I did." "On the wall?" "Yes." Dolores blinked. "That's dramatic." "It's not for decoration," Gloria said, adjusting the oxygen tubing near her collarbone. "It's for documentation." The oven clicked on behind them. Somewhere down the hall, a door creaked. Dolores didn't press further. She understood more than she admitted. That evening, Lena stood in the hallway for a long time before knocking. Gloria was in her armchair, reading. The fire crackled softly behind her, and a cup of broth steamed on the table to her right. She didn't look up. "I saw the frame," Lena said. Gloria turned a page. "You really put legal paperwork on the wall?" Still no response. Lena stepped further in, her voice quieter now. "Eric says you changed everything. Is that true?" Gloria closed her book with a soft thud, and finally met her daughter-in-law's gaze. "You already know the answer." "I think we should talk about it," Lena said, folding her arms. "Like adults." Gloria pointed toward the hallway. "It's already in writing, in ink, in glass. You don't have to like it, you just have to read it." Lena bristled. "And that's it? You're just going to throw us out of your life with a signature?" Gloria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Number, I'm going to make sure that signature outlives you." From the kitchen, Eric's voice called out, "Lena?" He appeared a moment later, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked tired, bone-tired, the kind that sleep doesn't fix. "Is this how you treat family?" he asked, looking between the two women. Gloria's expression didn't change. "No," she said softly. "This is how I treat people who cut cords." Eric's mouth opened, then closed. No rebuttal came. Lena stepped back, her composure flickering like a bad bulb. She looked at the fire, at the framed documents, then at the old photo above them. "James would be ashamed," she said, her voice too thin to carry the weight she wanted it to. Gloria stood slowly, pressing against the armrest with both hands. "James taught me what to protect. Now I'm honoring that." Neither Lena nor Eric had anything left to say. They retreated down the hall together, less of a team now, more like two people waiting to be told what they'd already lost. Later that night, as the fire dimmed and the wind brushed against the eaves, Gloria passed the hallway one more time. She paused at the frames, the photo, the trust. And in that rare slant of moonlight that sometimes visits just before sleep, she saw it. In the picture, her younger self was smiling at James. But now, reflected faintly in the glass, was the same smile, only hers. The envelope was thick and expensive, the kind designed to hold settlements, not sympathy. Terrence Blake held it in his hand for a full minute before opening it. He was alone in his office, rain streaking gently down the high windows, Bach playing low in the background. When he slid the document out, he already knew what he'd find. The letterhead read Wainwright and Schlesinger, LLP, a Denver firm with a reputation for aggressive estate challenges. The tone was predictably polite but razor-edged. It opened with, "On behalf of our clients, Lena and Eric Eastston," and proceeded with a dense, calculated threat of legal contestation. Terrence read it once, then again. His jaw didn't tighten, his hands didn't shake. He simply exhaled through his nose and reached for the phone. By noon the next day, the Eastons had received a 20-page rebuttal. It included a notarized witness affidavit from Hannah Logan, time-stamped digital reports from the home nurse agency, audio transcripts of the hallway recording, a scan of the DNR order, photo documentation of the bruising Gloria sustained, Gloria's signed revocation of Lena's medical proxy, a sworn statement from Terrence himself detailing the trust restructure. At the top, in clean black print, the first page read, "Notice of formal resistance to inheritance contest, with enforcement clause 18.7 active." Lena's attorneys never replied. The rain had passed by evening, leaving the sidewalks slick and reflective. Gloria stood at the kitchen counter signing a new document. Her oxygen hissed softly, and her cardigan sleeves were rolled just high enough to show the blue veins along her forearms. "This one," she said to Terrence, "adds the gift to the respiratory therapy unit at the hospital." Terrence nodded, already initialing his witness lines. "It'll show under Charitable Allocations Section 9.2. Do you want that donation visible or anonymous?" "Visible," she replied. "They need to know where breath belongs." He didn't argue. The final copy was folded carefully into a new folder, this one with a navy blue cover and a single word embossed on the front. "Legacy." Terrence hesitated before leaving. "Gloria," he said, voice lower now, "you're going to win this, but it won't feel like winning." She looked up from the folder. "This isn't a victory, this is oxygen. You either get it or you don't." He left quietly after that. Later that week, Eric showed up alone. It was just past 5. The light outside had dipped into gold, and Hannah was preparing soup in the kitchen. Gloria sat in her usual spot by the fireplace, a crocheted throw over her knees. She didn't greet him, just waited. He stood by the fireplace, hands jammed in his coat pockets, eyes flicking toward the framed trust document before quickly turning away. "I read it," he said finally. "All of it." "Good," Gloria replied. He shifted his weight. "I think you're being harsh." She looked at him, not unkindly. "You considered her lies without asking for my truth. That has a cost." He blinked, throat tightening. She continued, calm but immovable. "Now you can consider this peace, and this quiet, and decide what they're worth to you." Eric didn't answer. A full minute passed before he turned and left the room. The front door closed softly behind him. That night, Miriam from the oxygen supply company arrived with a new portable tank bag, sleek, matte gray, monogrammed in cursive GE. She adjusted the straps carefully as Gloria watched from her chair. "This model's lighter," Miriam said. "More discreet, easy to carry if you ever get tired of pulling wheels behind you." "I'm not tired yet," Gloria said, "but it's nice to be ready." Hannah entered just as Miriam zipped up the last panel. She caught sight of the monogram and smiled faintly. "It suits you," she said. Gloria ran her fingers across the stitching. "It does. It's mine." That evening, after the house had gone quiet, Gloria took her new oxygen bag into the front room and placed it gently beside the fireproof safe. She looked down at it. Compact, reliable, customized. Just like her plan. The locksmith arrived just after sunrise. A silver van with no logo, just the name Precision Entry, printed discreetly near the rear bumper. The man who stepped out wore gloves, not to hide anything, but to keep the work clean. His eyes didn't linger on Gloria's oxygen tubing or the cane she leaned on. He simply nodded and asked, "Every lock?" Gloria opened the front door wide and said, "Everyone." By mid-morning, the house had 6 new deadbolts, rekeyed and reinforced. The garage opener was reset. The keypad at the side entrance had a new code known only to Gloria, Hannah, and Terrence. Even the back gate latch, rusted and long ignored, had been replaced. When it was done, Gloria stood at the threshold of her own home, breathing slow, shallow, but steady. The locksmith handed her the final key on a matte brass ring and said, "There's no copy unless you make it." She nodded. "That's the point." Lena and Eric returned late Sunday evening, the wheels of their borrowed sedan crackling over loose gravel as they pulled into the driveway. The porch light was on, the curtains were drawn, but nothing else moved. Eric carried 2 duffel bags and a half-eaten bag of trail mix. Lena clutched her phone, already scrolling. Eric reached for the door handle and stopped. The key turned halfway, then jammed. "What the hell?" he muttered, trying again. No give, no click. The lock didn't budge. He knocked once, then again, louder. "Mom?" Lena peered through the front window. "The blinds are shut. Did she lock us out?" On the door, taped neatly at eye level, was a piece of ivory stationery from Gloria's desk. The handwriting was unmistakable, calm, block print, steady as ever. "You are no longer welcome. You are no longer trusted. You do not live here." Eric read it twice, eyes narrowing. Lena snatched it from the door and turned to him. "This is illegal. We live here. You're her son. I'm on the lease." Eric stared at her. "There is no lease." She stepped back and slammed her fist against the window pane. "Gloria, open the damn door." The porch light flickered. Nothing else moved. Inside, Hannah stood by the kitchen island, phone in hand. She had already dialed the local police dispatch, calmly, precisely. "Yes," she said. "They're attempting to gain entry to a private residence they no longer have legal access to. Yes, I have the trust documents. Yes, it's an emergency. No, she doesn't feel safe with them inside anymore." Dolores was already outside. She had stepped onto her own porch with a pair of binoculars and her phone camera running. From across the street, she zoomed in as Lena pounded harder on the glass, screaming now. "You think this is done? You think a few papers and signatures erase family?" Hannah stepped beside Gloria at the window but didn't open the blinds. "Police will be here in 5, she said. "You don't have to say a word." "I won't," Gloria replied. "Not to them." Outside, Eric paced the porch while Lena circled the house, yanking at the side gate, then the back doorknob. All locked, all sealed. By the time the cruiser rolled up, lights off, quiet approach, Dolores had a 5-minute video of Lena shouting and shaking the window frames. The officer stepped out and greeted them calmly. "You two have any documentation showing this is your legal residence?" Eric hesitated. Lena opened her mouth, then closed it. The officer gestured toward the sidewalk. "Let's take this out front." The next 5 minutes were quiet. Inside the study, Gloria sat at the desk, reviewing the new title paperwork. It had been finalized that morning. The house was no longer listed under her personal name. It now belonged to Willow Hill Holdings, LLC, a single-member entity structured under the Eastston Trust, shielded from contestation, insulated from liability. Terrence had called it a smart move. Gloria called it necessary. By 10 o'clock, the porch was empty again. Gloria stepped outside and retrieved the letter Lena had crumpled and thrown into the bushes. She smoothed it, walked it back inside, and placed it neatly in the fireplace. It burned clean. The new system arrived in 3 boxes. It took Hannah and the technician just under an hour to assemble. A whisper-quiet concentrator unit, a backup tank with dual-port redundancy, and a digital wall panel that monitored battery levels in real time. Everything had been selected with precision. Silent tubing, sleek matte finish, a built-in battery powerful enough to run 48 hours without power. Gloria watched from the hallway, leaning lightly on her cane, her expression unreadable. "You sure you want it in the front room?" Hannah asked. "Could tuck it by the study." "I want it where I sleep," Gloria said, "where I choose to sleep." The machine hummed to life with a soft pulse, barely audible beneath the usual sounds of the house. Creaking pipes, furnace click, the occasional crow from the back fence. But somehow, its rhythm felt different. It didn't sound like survival. It sounded like sovereignty. That evening, Gloria opened a new notebook. Not the green one, not the one with red ink. This one was navy, linen-covered, unlined. She titled the first page in clean cursive, "The Days After the Cord." The first entry was brief. "Day 1. No one screamed. No one entered. I breathed all the same." She closed the book and slid it into the drawer next to her bed, alongside the framed DNR order and her newest medical alert badge. On Wednesday, Hannah asked if she wanted to go for a drive. "Where?" Gloria asked. "Up toward Estes. Foothills are still dry. Might be nice to get out." They didn't speak much on the way. The windows were cracked just enough to let in the smell of pine and dust. Gloria wore sunglasses and her gray oxygen bag across her shoulder, hands resting calmly in her lap. As they curved along a narrow ridge, Gloria finally broke the silence. "You know what's funny?" she said. Hannah glanced over. "What?" "I forgot how many things I planned to do when I was better. All those little errands. Photo albums to sort, stories to write. I told myself, after this week, after this scan, after this flare-up. And now?" Gloria looked out the window. "Now I don't plan. I document." They pulled off at a lookout point and sat in the car, engine off, watching shadows stretch long across the grass. For a moment, Gloria closed her eyes, not because she was tired, but because it felt good to rest without fear. Later that night, Gloria opened her funeral pre-arrangement form on the kitchen table. No ceremony, no printed obituaries, no family requests. A small service, attended only by her choosing, music optional, flowers declined. She wrote "no family notification" in capital letters. Under pallbearer preferences, she wrote "handled by staff." At the bottom of the form, she added a line in the margin. "Burial isn't the end, it's just the last time they have to stay quiet." She folded the form neatly and slid it into her legacy folder behind the trust documents. That weekend, Dolores rang the doorbell holding a small gift bag with tissue paper popping out the top. "I saw this and couldn't resist," she said. "It's morbid, but, well, so are we." Inside was a black t-shirt, soft and worn in, with white block letters that read, "I'm still here. Not sorry." Gloria chuckled, actually chuckled, as she unfolded it. "This was in a store?" "Online, Etsy, got 4 stars." Gloria held it up against her chest, oxygen tubing crisscrossed underneath. "You think I should wear this to my next checkup?" "I think you should wear it to bed," Dolores said. "Let the walls hear it." They sat on the porch for nearly an hour after that. No agenda, no battles, just old friends and early autumn wind, brushing past their knees like it had nothing left to prove. That night, as Gloria turned in, she added one more line to her journal. "Peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from insulation." She closed the book and turned out the light. The folding chairs were arranged in uneven rows, half full by the time Gloria was wheeled into the community center auditorium. She hated wheelchairs, but Hannah insisted on using one for events like this: long distances, unpredictable ramps. Gloria had relented, but only after securing her oxygen bag across her lap like a purse and making Hannah promise not to hover. The room smelled of weak coffee and dry carpet. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. A banner behind the podium read, "Advocacy through experience, voices of elder care," in cheerful block print. Most in the audience were older than Gloria. Some were younger but worn by their work: social workers, advocates, volunteers with state tags clipped to windbreakers. A few wore expressions of polite obligation, but others, especially the ones sitting up front, watched with something close to reverence. They'd read the flyer, Gloria Eastston, private citizen, former librarian. Topic: autonomy and boundaries in caregiving environments. She didn't bring notes. When the moderator called her name, she stood slowly, gripping the sides of the podium, and took one deep, assisted breath before speaking. "I'm not here to shame caregivers," she began, her voice soft but steady. "Most do good work. Some, extraordinary. But systems don't fall apart from outside, they break from the inside when silence becomes easier than accountability." A few heads nodded. "I'm 77. I use oxygen. I use a cane. I do not use apologies to explain my boundaries." There was a pause, brief but electric. 3 months ago, someone I trusted tried to take the air from me, literally. That someone was family. No gasps, just stillness. I didn't scream. I didn't file charges. I documented. I revised. I transferred ownership of my story and my property. Someone in the back, young, wearing a lanyard that read Elder Care State Division, lifted a phone to record. Gloria continued, her voice not rising but narrowing, like a scalpel. "You cannot keep your peace if you leave your paperwork behind." At the end, she said nothing dramatic, just closed her folder, thanked the group, and returned to her seat. But the applause that followed wasn't polite. It was long, real, the kind that doesn't echo, it lands. 2 days later, someone posted a clip from her speech to a caregiver subreddit. The video was grainy, filmed from a phone, the caption short, "My agency had us watch this. She made me cry. Chumderies matter." Then it was shared again, on a Facebook group for home health nurses, then on TikTok, where a younger viewer simply stitched it with, "Someone finally said it. My grandma needed to hear this." Within a week, the clip had over 60,000 views. Hannah showed her the numbers over tea one morning. Her phone turned sideways to play the muted video. Gloria watched herself on screen. Voice low, hair neatly pinned back, shoulders square. She didn't recognize the version of her that others now called brave. "I didn't mean to go viral," she murmured. "You didn't," Hannah said. "You meant to be heard." The envelope arrived in early November. No return address, just a smudge of ink near the top corner and her name, scrawled with no salutation. It wasn't typed. It wasn't sealed well. Hannah handed it to her, already mid-breakfast. Gloria stared at it for a long while before sliding it across the table, unopened. "What do you want me to do with it?" Hannah asked. Gloria didn't look up from her coffee. "File it." "Under what?" She tapped the edge of her mug. "Unopened. Unworthy." Hannah folded the envelope, dropped it into a drawer beside the stove. And that was that. Neither of them ever opened it. But Dolores did ask about it later. Said she'd seen Lena drop it off, hood up, fast and silent. What could she possibly say now? Dolores had asked, equal parts curiosity and contempt. Gloria hadn't answered directly. She just turned back to her notebook and wrote, "Silence is not absence. It's authority." That evening, as the wind scraped against the windows and the leaves began to swirl along the curb, Gloria sat by the fire and opened her laptop. A blank Word doc greeted her. She stared at it for a long time, fingers hovering above the keys. Then, finally, she typed, Chapter 1. The Cord. The first thing Gloria did was strip the wallpaper. It had been Lena's choice, a stiff ivory damask, applied under the pretense of professionalism when the guest room was rebranded as Lena's home office. But no actual work had ever been done in there, just phone calls whispered too loudly, bags dropped carelessly on the bed, and the occasional glare at Gloria's bedroom door when she coughed too loud at night. Now, Gloria stood in the doorway holding a plastic scraper, sunlight slanting through the half-open blinds. The oxygen line stretched easily from the hallway concentrator, trailing behind her like a quiet ribbon. Hannah offered to help. Gloria declined. "This one's mine," she said, "start to finish." It took 3 days. When the final strip of wallpaper came down, Gloria wiped the walls with lemon oil and opened every window. The cold air was sharp, but honest. She liked it. Next came color. She picked a soft green. "Sage," the paint swatch said. "Tranquility without softness," Gloria muttered, approving. The trim was done in bright white, the ceiling left alone. She brought in bookshelves, the narrow kind that hugged the wall without bullying the room. One was filled with old titles from her years as a librarian. The other held poetry, a few first editions, and a small silver box where she stored every hospital bracelet she'd ever worn. She placed it high on the shelf, not to forget, but to oversee. In the corner, she positioned a wide, deep armchair upholstered in navy velvet. It sat low to the ground, a small ottoman in front, and just enough space behind to tuck the oxygen line neatly beneath the rug. The chair faced the window. Next to it, a ceramic pot with a rubber plant already showing new leaves. On the 4th morning, Gloria sat in the chair and stared at the empty wall across from her. She didn't need to hang anything. Some silences deserved to stay bare. That afternoon, the doorbell rang. Not the sharp, expectant kind, but 2 soft knocks on the screen. Hannah opened it. "Hi," said the girl on the porch. 17, maybe 18, a backpack slung over one shoulder, spiral notebook in hand. "I'm Jessa, Gloria's niece." Hannah stepped aside without hesitation. "She's waiting for you." Jessa entered slowly, her Converse leaving a faint trail of slush from the driveway. She paused in the entryway, eyes wide. Smells like cedar and something herbal. Fresh sage, Gloria called from the hallway. Literally. Jessa followed the voice to the guest room, the new room, and stopped in the doorway. This used to be someone else's claim, Gloria interrupted. Now it's mine. Sit if you want. Jessa sat on the ottoman and opened her notebook. I have this assignment for English, oral family histories. It's extra credit, but I thought. She trailed off. Gloria reached for the folded blanket at the edge of the chair and pulled it over her lap. You thought right. Can I ask anything? You can ask. I'll answer the truth, not the gossip. Jessa grinned and flipped to a fresh page. Okay. First question. When did you know you were done letting people rewrite your story? Gloria smiled faintly. When someone tried to end it for me. The pen didn't stop moving. They talked for over an hour. About James, about the early years in Fort Collins, about library systems before computers and love before timelines. Gloria didn't withhold. She didn't dramatize. She just told it as it was, and always had been. At the end, Jessa closed her notebook, eyes a little red. Thank you. Gloria reached into the side table and pulled out a small key. Brass, new cut. She placed it in Jessa's palm. You'll get the stories, she said. And the house key. They had neither. Jessa's fingers closed around it, slowly. Does that mean? Gloria nodded toward the bookshelf. Check the folder labeled Trustee Succession. It's yours. Legal by morning. That evening, as Hannah brewed tea in the kitchen and the house settled into a low hush, Gloria sat in the velvet chair and looked out the window. Not watching. Just remembering how good it felt when the room finally stopped lying about who it belonged to. It started with a dropped spoon, just a faint clatter on the kitchen tile, barely enough to draw attention. Gloria had been stirring her tea as she always did at 4 p.m. when her right hand simply let go. She stared at the silver handle on the floor, her mind trying to catch up to her body. Her lips tingled. The heat in her chest was dull but pressing. She blinked twice, slow and deliberate, then reached for the edge of the counter with her left hand. She didn't call for help. She didn't panic. She pressed the alert button on her wristband and waited. Hannah was back from errands in 7 minutes. The hospital team was ready in 10. The emergency folder, labeled in red and kept near the front door, was handed directly to the attending physician. DNR, trust documentation, medical proxy assignments, insurance authorizations, medication lists, and a note from Terrence himself. All decisions default to the healthcare advocate on file. Do not contact next of kin without legal counsel present. It worked, all of it. The diagnosis was a mild ischemic stroke, minor damage, no permanent loss, an overnight stay in a quiet private room on the 3rd floor. Gloria didn't cry. She didn't sleep. She lay beneath the thin blanket and listened to the hum of the wall monitor, the soft exhale of the oxygen line. Her body had stumbled, but her life hadn't. Everything held. The next morning, while Hannah adjusted the blinds and reviewed discharge instructions, the nurse entered with a frown. There's someone downstairs. Says she's family, demanding to come up. Hannah glanced at Gloria. Lena, Gloria said flatly. The nurse nodded. I'll handle it, Hannah said. She stepped into the hallway, pulled up the policy binder from her phone, and pointed to the line highlighted in yellow. No visitors not listed under approved access. Legal documentation supersedes assumed familial status. Security was called. Lena never made it past the lobby. Across town, Terrence stood by the fax machine in his office, watching the pages transmit. Updated POA, notarized trust packet, Jessa's designation as successor, and a signed legal reinforcement of Gloria's right to restrict contact. The hospital legal team responded with a simple email, received and enforced. Your client is secure. At 2:12 p.m., Gloria's chart was updated. Do not admit. Lena Eastston. That evening, as Gloria sipped ice water through a straw, her phone buzzed. She didn't answer. It was Jessa who picked up, sitting in the newly repainted guest room, notebook beside her. Hello? Eric's voice was thick with stress. Jessa, please, I just need to know if she's okay. She is? She's She had a stroke. I should be there. I'm her son. You're not her advocate. You're not in the trust. And after what she's told me, you don't get updates. Not anymore." Eric was quiet on the other end. Jessa's voice didn't waver. "If she wants to speak to you, she will. But you're not entitled to her breath, not even now." She hung up without waiting for a reply. Gloria was discharged the next morning. Hannah drove. They didn't speak much during the ride, but when they reached the front walk, Gloria paused before stepping inside. "Still mine," she whispered. She slept in the front room that night, oxygen steady, pulse firm. A slight tremor remained in her right hand, but her grip was strong enough to turn the page of her journal. She wrote slower, but wrote all the same. Day 47. My body faltered. My boundaries did not. The next afternoon, Dolores dropped off a batch of scones and a lavender sachet for the reading room. "I heard," she said softly. "Glad you're back." "I never left," Gloria replied. At the kitchen table that evening, Jessa flipped through her notebook. "Can I ask something?" "Of course," Gloria said. "Weren't you scared?" Gloria tapped her temple. "My mind stayed mine." Then her chest. "My heart kept rhythm." Then the folder beside her. "And my story stayed sealed. That's what survival looks like now." The court order came in a pale blue envelope, stamped with the Larimer County seal and postmarked 2 days earlier. It was addressed to Gloria Eastston, trustee and beneficiary, and hand-delivered by a courier who didn't know what he was carrying. He tipped his hat and left without comment. Inside was the ruling. 1 page, no ceremony. Petition for contestation of Eastston Trust and Health Proxy, filed by Lena Eastston, is hereby denied. All previously executed legal documents stand as controlling. Further appeals will not be entertained without evidence of fraud or coercion, neither of which has been demonstrated. Case closed. It was over, not with a bang, but with a line. Gloria folded the page in half and set it in the resolved section of her legacy binder. Then she opened a drawer in the writing desk and pulled out a cream stationery sheet, the kind with thick deckled edges and her initials pressed in silver foil at the top. She didn't write quickly. She didn't write much. Just, "Eric, this is what you ignored. That's why you're not in it. Mother." She placed the letter in an envelope, then added 3 items. A glossy color print of the hallway camera frame, the moment Lena yanked the oxygen cord, frozen mid-motion, with Gloria's face turned in gasping profile. A full audio transcript of the 30-second recording, time-stamped and notarized. A single excerpt from the will. "I leave no property, no memory, and no forgiveness to those who let breath become a bargaining chip." She sealed the envelope without a return address. She didn't mail it. She gave it to Terrence. "If he asks again," she said, "give him this." Nothing else. Terrence nodded, sliding the letter into a fireproof document sleeve. "You sure?" "Certain." That evening, Gloria sat with Hannah in the back room, a cup of lemon balm tea in one hand, the oxygen line looped casually across her lap. "You should know," Gloria said. "I added a stipend." Hannah blinked. "A what?" "Future compensation. For loyalty. For presence. For being the witness who stayed." "I didn't ask for that." "I know," Gloria replied. "That's why it's earned." She pulled a small envelope from under her tea coaster and passed it over. Inside was a check, dated, signed, and annotated with a single note. "Thank you for guarding the door when others tried to knock it down." Hannah didn't cry. But she didn't speak for a long time either. Later that night, Gloria stepped out onto the porch. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant smoke. Across the street, Dolores was clipping frostbitten basil in her front planter. "You hear back yet?" she called. "It's done," Gloria said. Judge ruled against them. Dolores walked over slowly, shears in one hand, scarf looped high around her neck. "That's it then?" Gloria nodded. "All of it. Legal, medical, financial. Locked." Dolores leaned on the railing. "Funny, they thought you were oxygen-dependent. Turns out they were you-dependent." Gloria allowed herself a thin smile. "Dependency doesn't always look like weakness. Sometimes it looks like assumption." They stood in silence for a moment, just listening to the wind flirt with the mailbox lid. Dolores finally asked, "Do you feel relieved?" "No," Gloria said. "I feel confirmed." Inside, Jessa was sitting cross-legged on the floor of the reading room, cataloging Gloria's book collection into categories: fiction, nonfiction, legacy. She had a blank label waiting on the top shelf: Inheritance Through Story. In the kitchen, the emergency folder was freshly updated. In the living room, the trust binder sat next to the fire, unopened but never out of reach. And on the hallway table, just beneath the framed Christmas photo, sat one more edition, a small brass box labeled "Deliver Only If Asked." Inside it, sealed and waiting, was Eric's letter. 1 year later, the house no longer creaked under tension. There were no voices behind doors, no hurried footsteps, no slamming cabinets, just the hum of the concentrator in the corner and the occasional flutter of curtains when the spring wind passed through the open windows. Gloria moved slower now, but with no help. The cane rested beside the reading chair more than it touched her hand. Her oxygen line, now attached to the sleek whisper-quiet unit, curled gently across the floor like ribbon on a gift, still present, still hers. The framed trust still hung in the hallway. Next to it, she'd added a new frame. This one didn't hold documents or dates. It held a single page torn from her journal. Day 365, still here, still choosing. Jessa came every Saturday, always with her notebook and always with muffins, blueberry if she'd baked, banana if she hadn't. She never asked about Lena or Eric anymore. She didn't need to. Today, she sat cross-legged on the floor again, scanning a binder of old photos while Gloria dictated details, dates, places, names. "That one's 1986, Gloria said, tapping a photo of James building a fence in the backyard. "He thought the posts were too shallow. Dug them again. Twice." Jessa laughed. He looked so annoyed. He was, but it held for 20 years. They spent the next hour sorting photos into piles: family, Fort Collins, stories to tell. Outside, the robins had returned. The lilac bush near the driveway was starting to bloom again, more fully than it had in years. By late afternoon, Gloria was alone. She walked the length of the hallway, trailing her fingers along the baseboard, stopping beneath the frames. She didn't look at them. Not this time. They didn't need her attention to remain real. The house smelled like lemon oil and pine cleaner, windows cracked open in every room. No one raised their voice, no one whispered behind a door. Gloria reached the front room and settled into the velvet chair, pulling the oxygen tube over her shoulder like an old friend. Then she closed her eyes and inhaled, slow and deep. "This," she whispered, "was the last cut." From the kitchen came the quiet rattle of porcelain. Hannah appeared a moment later, moving as she always did, soft steps, but with purpose. She carried a wooden tray with 2 cups and a small saucer of lemon cookies. "You remembered the cookies," Gloria said. "You remembered the Saturday," Hannah replied, smiling. Gloria gestured to the chair across from her. "Tea?" Hannah asked, beginning to pour. But Gloria lifted the pot instead. "I'll do the first," she said. "I have the breath for it." Hannah didn't argue. She let the moment happen. They sat across from each other, steam rising between them, the late sun streaking golden light across the carpet. No lawsuits, no doctors, no shouting at glass panes. Just quiet. Just now. Jessa's laughter echoed faintly from the back room as she rediscovered a picture of Gloria in a Halloween cape from 1972. Dolores's porch radio played an old jazz tune across the street. Somewhere down the road, a lawnmower started and stopped again, but inside, all was still. Gloria took a sip from her cup, then looked out the window. The sky was pale blue, unmarked, open. She breathed in deeply, once, then again. Her voice barely touched the air as she spoke, but it held. "They cut the cord, I cut the tie, and inhaled the future they'll never touch.